Welcome, everyone. My name is Gordon Friesen. I am president of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Today we are holding a press conference in support of Bill 218, advanced by member Tamara Jansen, to reverse permission of euthanasia for mental illness alone, now set to begin in 2027. Our takeaway message is this: no euthanasia for mental illness. The MAiD policy Canadians have received is not at all as promised. MAiD was only to be for people who are dying, only for adults, and only for people who are able to truly choose. Unfortunately, all of those promises have been broken. Bill C-7, for example, did away with reasonably foreseeable death. But most important is the expectation of real personal choice. That is what fuels support for MAiD, not that people believe that some patients should die, but that they might perhaps themselves make free, informed, competent, and adult choices. Obviously, however, euthanasia for the mentally ill does not fit that description, for the symptoms of mental illness often make that sort of choice impossible. Indeed, it was long assumed that all MAiD patients would be carefully examined to rule out the influence of psychiatric disorder. Unfortunately, though, such hopes ignore the perverse reality of presenting death as medical care. The capacity we demand for medical consent is a much lower bar, and that is because medical treatment is understood to be a good and even essential benefit, so that gaining patient consent should be as easy as possible. For the mentally ill, this means that a person might be declared legally incompetent even to spend their own money, but still be considered capable of consenting to a doctor's proposition of medical homicide. Please notice that I very deliberately say consenting to a doctor's proposition of medical homicide. For although ordinary people may still mistakenly believe that patients must themselves spontaneously request euthanasia, that is not how medicine works. It is the doctor who informs patients of available options and then steers them towards whichever one he or she believes to be best. Candidly speaking, it is this aggressive marketing of death as medical treatment which has turned a few hundred expected MAiD cases into over 16,000 in 2024 alone. And it also explains recent stories of people in acute psychiatric distress desperately seeking institutional help, who are then professionally informed of their eligibility to be killed in that place by doctors. Clearly, all of this is disastrous for the security of those persons afflicted with mental illness. But from a wider perspective, it also destroys all notion of MAiD as an authentic patient choice. Plainly, the precedent of medical homicide for mental illness opens a crucial gateway to other situations of questionable choice. Now on the drawing board, for example, we find the projected euthanasia of children from 12 years onward, and of infants up to 12 years, in addition to demented seniors whose former selves had made advance requests. And behind these again, we have other cohorts of persons who are no longer or have never been capable of consent. Any weakening of the competent choice requirement places all of these at deadly risk. The only way to prevent such appalling outcomes is to definitely close that pathway now. So, for the sake of the mentally ill and for that of larger society, let us say together, no euthanasia for mental illness. Join us in supporting Bill 218 for that purpose. Maintenant, j'aimerais m'adresser directement aux députés québécois et québécoises. En 2021, j'ai eu l'honneur de participer aux consultations de la Commission spéciale sur l'évolution de la loi concernant les soins de fin de vie. L'une des conclusions principales de cet exercice se lit ainsi. La Commission recommande de ne pas élargir l'accès à l'aide médicale à mourir aux personnes dont le seul problème médical est un trouble mental. En conséquence, l'article 26 du loi modifié stipule un trouble mental ne peut pas être une maladie pour laquelle une personne peut formuler une demande. Je vous somme donc tous et toutes de défendre cette politique non partisane telle qu'établie par l'Assemblée nationale et d'accueillir positivement le projet de loi 218. Our first speaker today is perhaps the best known, most knowledgeable, and most active opponent of euthanasia and assisted suicide, not only in Canada, but maybe around the world as well. Co-founder and international chair of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, Alex Schadenberg.
Thank you very much, Gordon. So today we're coming in support of Bill C-218, Tamara Jansen's bill, which would reverse the approval of euthanasia for mental illness as the sole criteria. And when you look at this, what happened, as many people will be well aware, when Bill C-7 passed in March of 2021, that included approval for MAiD for mental illness alone as a sole criteria, but has been delayed now, and it will be delayed at this moment until March of 2027 as of the decision of the previous Parliament. The problem with this is, of course, is that March of 2027, when it comes, this will be allowed, and this should never even be considered. And I'll give you several reasons for this right off the bat. First of all, I am opposed to killing people, but even off the very basic concept of MAiD for mental illness, that undermines the whole concept of whether someone can properly consent, whether they're truly consenting, whether they are of their right mind, whether there's alternatives for them. For instance, when we amended the law in 2021 to allow people who were not terminally ill, people who did not have a grievous and irremediable medical, when they did not have to have a terminal condition, what was remaining is that they had to have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. So then the assumption is that somebody who has mental health problems actually has got an irremediable medical condition. And psychiatrists are saying that's really not known. We can't predict that. Now, just so you know, this Bill C-218 only affects this section of the law. It would only prevent euthanasia for mental illness alone. One other thing, though, when you look at this, is when we found out about Tamara Jansen's bill, we put out information to people who were who supported our work. We got a series of letters from a bunch of our supporters talking about their own times when they were going through significant mental illness, and are so happy that MAiD for mental illness was not available to them at that time. I got one letter from a woman named Andrea, and I think this letter was very important because she clearly would have qualified for MAiD based on somebody who might say she would have an irremediable medical condition, which in fact was not irremediable. And she talked about that the fact that when she was younger, so she says twice in 2011, she had attempted suicide, and she was put in a psychiatric place for treatment, and then 3 more times, and then over 14 months between 2015 and 16, once again she was receiving psychiatric care for her deep mental health issues. In her case, this was continuous. She talks about the fact that they said that it did not seem that she was reacting to treatment. So the whole concept of irremediability for someone who actually believes that's a criteria for MAiD for mental illness, she says she would have probably then qualified without a problem. The important thing is, over the years, her life has changed. And she's writing here, you know, I'm well now. She said in here, now this is a couple months ago she sent this to me. She said she had just gotten married. She is having her first child. Her life has changed. She said she could never have predicted that in 2015 or 2016 or 2011 when she was receiving psychiatric care and it seemed that she was resistant to treatment, that she would be healthy. And she's healthy today. The point of it is that if it had been available then, she would have wanted it. As she says, I would have wanted it. I would have been dead. I would have never recovered. This is the problem. You can't allow MAiD in these conditions. I don't believe you should allow MAiD for any conditions, but this is very particular. It clearly undermines the concept of the freedom of choice, autonomy, and one's ability to consent. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alex. We will now hear from a most exceptional woman who willingly carried the burden of our collective security as a soldier, and who has paid the personal price for that generosity in the psychological wounds she's suffered. Someone who has thought deeply about mental trauma and euthanasia, combat veteran, CEO, and mental health expert, Gunner Kelsi Sheren.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsi Sheren, and when I was 18 years old, I decided to put the uniform on. I understood that I might die for my country, but what I didn't understand was that day, or one day, my own government would quietly offer to help me do it. I'm here today as a Canadian combat veteran. I live with post-traumatic stress disorder, a traumatic brain injury, major depressive disorder, and according to the doctors, treatment-resistant depression, along with hearing loss. That weight never really leaves. I am 100% disabled, even if I don't look like it. I've seen what war does, not just overseas, but long after you come home. And what I'm seeing now is something I never thought possible in Canada. Behind closed doors, in quiet conversations, veterans are being offered MAiD, medical assistance in dying. Not therapy, not recovery, not support, and not death, and not help, but death. And today, Senator Pamela Wallin is hosting a backdoor closed meeting with the pro-death cult Dying with Dignity. She's helping them lobby to convince more MPs that they should vote to kill more of the vulnerable, disabled Canadians starting in 2027. See, we're told this is compassion, and we're told it's choice. But when somebody's drowning in trauma and desperation, that's not a choice. That's coercion wearing a polite face. I've spoken with veterans who have reached out for help and asked for therapy, for hope, for treatment, and what they got instead was an offer to end their life. I've spoken to more veterans now, and the whistleblowers just keep coming. This is not one or two. This is well documented, over 20 and growing by the day. I know this because I report on it daily, and people seem to trust me with their stories. Imagine how deep that hopelessness must go. When your own country looks at you and decides that death is the very best it can offer. This isn't hypothetical anymore. This isn't some dystopian book. This is the reality in Canada, and it's happening. And it's not just happening to veterans. People with disabilities like myself and others, with chronic pain, with depression, bad breakups, loss, poverty, they're all being told the same thing. You should give up and die. They're being nudged towards death because supporting them is seen as too expensive and inconvenient. This is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. This is not compassion, especially when death is offered instead of care. This is a moral rot disguised as mercy, and this government is full of it. And while this is all happening, Canada still refuses to give veterans access to treatments that could actually save their lives. For example, like psychedelic-assisted therapy. Yes, controversial, but evidence-based, safe, and effective, used and studied around the world to treat PTSD and trauma. I know this because I am the only recipient in Canadian medical history to have access to regulated psilocybin outside of a clinical trial. I am living proof that it works. So we're told no, we're told to quietly suffer, or worse, we're told to die with dignity. That's not dignity, that's policy-driven despair, driven by sick people to hurt more. That's not healthcare, it's called surrender. And it sends a clear message: your life costs too much money. Veterans are dying, people with disabilities are dying, not because they want too much, but because they've become convinced their lives no longer matter by an entire healthcare system, lobbying groups, and frankly, this government. Canada doesn't even track veteran suicides. And I know this because today I'm testifying to just that. Think about that. We send people to war, and when they come home broken, we stop counting you. See, it's a lot easier to face the truth when you refuse to measure it. This is a government choosing death over duty every single day. Veterans and civilians don't need MAiD. We need meaning. We need community. We need real treatment. We need a country that still believes that we are worth saving. So let's stop calling this choice, because it's not. And let's start calling it what it is: survival, if you're lucky. This isn't about dying with dignity. That's an oxymoron at best. Giving up and quitting when life gets hard. And trust me, I know what it feels like when life gets hard. It's about living a life with real dignity, and rolling back the expansion is the only way forward to do that. And I believe that we can do that with this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for that powerful witness, Kelsi. Our last speaker is an outstanding leader in the field of family medicine, a longtime critic of euthanasia policy, and a passionate defender of medical integrity. He is a tireless apostle of common sense and basic human decency. Dr. Paul Saba.
People with only a mental disorder may be euthanized as of March 2027. This despite the overwhelming evidence that people with mental disorders can be treated, and most psychiatrists cannot determine which patient has an irreversible and untreatable condition. From a medical legal standpoint, those with mental disorders requesting euthanasia, the euphemism is called medical assistance in dying, cannot make a free and informed consent because the desire to die in most cases is a symptom of a mental illness such as depression. The bill C-218, which will be voted later this year in Ottawa, will stop euthanizing, killing people with mental health disorders as the sole criteria, and must be supported by our members of Parliament who truly value life. Le projet de loi 218 mettra fin à l'adoption de l'euthanasie des personnes atteintes de problèmes de santé mentale comme le seul critère. Dans la plupart des cas, le désir de mourir est un symptôme de maladie mentale. 90% des personnes qui mettent fin à leur jour sont atteintes d'un trouble mental au moment de leur suicide. La plupart des personnes qui ont tenté ou qui ont réussi à se suicider ne veulent pas mourir. Ils veulent plutôt échapper à leur détresse émotionnelle. Selon une étude de Harvard, 90% des personnes qui ont tenté de suicider et qui n'ont pas réussi ne se sont pas suicidés après le traitement. Avec le bon traitement, le suicide a disparu. La plupart des personnes atteintes de troubles mentaux ont besoin de soutien psychiatrique, des psychologues et de travailleurs sociaux. Beaucoup vivent dans des situations financières et socialement précaires. Ils ont besoin d'un soutien financier, notamment un logement abordable et une sécurité alimentaire. Le système social et de santé canadien est déficient pour les personnes ayant des troubles de santé mentale. Au Québec, le délai moyen d'attente entre la référence à un psychiatre et un traitement est au moins 5 mois. Les psychologues sont rares et rarement accessibles dans le système de santé publique. Il est temps que les députés fassent preuve de solidarité et soutiennent les personnes atteintes de troubles de santé mentale. Nos concitoyens ont besoin de soins, de traitement et de soutien. Ils ne doivent pas être euthanasiés. Les parlementaires doivent mettre fin à l'aide médicale à mourir pour les personnes atteintes des problèmes de troubles de santé mentale. Ils doivent voter en faveur du projet de loi 218 et non pour l'euthanasie des personnes ayant des problèmes de santé mentale.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saba. I would now like to thank you all for your attention and repeat our principal message. No euthanasia for mental illness. And yes to Bill 218. Thank you very much.
All right, just a reminder for people joining us online, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function. Juste un petit rappel pour les gens qui nous joignent en ligne, si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée.
Any questions? Bill C-218 will probably have its first hour debate on December the 5th, give or take, Parliament might change by a day here and there. And so therefore, we're talking about a first hour debate before Christmas and a second hour debate probably in February. So the time is really important that people really consider this issue, talk to their members of Parliament, and allow democracy to do its duty. But the fact of it is that really Bill C-218 would reverse something which should have never been ever approved in the first place, this concept of MAiD for mental illness as a sole criteria, especially when you consider the fact that really it undermines the whole concept of one's true ability to consent to something which in fact is often related to their medical or health condition. If there's no other questions, you can contact Euthanasia Prevention Coalition by email at info@epcc.ca, and we're happy to share any information with you.
Thank you. This will conclude our press conference. Ceci mettra fin à la conférence de presse. Merci. Thank you.